Hey team, so today we're going to learn a third way to solve quadratics. Quadratics, remember, are anything that have an x squared in them. So the first way that we learned was by factoring, and we factored to solve. That's what we did yesterday, so notes 27. If you missed out on those, you should head back to those. And then the second way that we learned a long time ago was by graphing. And remember, that was when we had something like this, and we'd look for where it hit here and where it hit there. So today we're learning an even faster way to do it that works for some problems. So this is the third way, and that's by the square root property. So I can use the square root property when there is no b term. And we can solve the equation by rewriting it as ax squared equals c. So there are two basic steps here. The first one is to separate the square from everything. So we want to get the x squared all by itself. And then we're going to take this square root. And don't forget that your answer when you take a square root is a plus or a minus. That's because -3 times -3 gives you 9, as well as 3 times 3 gives you 9. That means that the square root of 9 is +3 and -3. So we're going to remember to put our plus and minus every time that we take a square root. So we have our basic ones in level 1 here. So for the first one, I see the x squared. It's all by itself. So I've already, the step 1 already accomplished. And then we're going to take the square root of both sides. Right? And that's going to mean that the square root and the square will cancel. That'll leave us with just x dropping out. And then the square root of 121 is positive and negative 11, because again 11 times 11 is 121, and -11 times -11 is 121. So our answer would be x equals 11 or x equals -11. Right? So we have two answers. We should always have two answers. All right. For our second problem here, I see that they are not separated. So the first thing I'm going to do is separate the square root, or separate the square from everything. I'm going to take away that 72 on both sides. It's going to leave me with y squared equals -72. I know that my second step is to take the square root of both sides. So I'm going to have the square root here and the square root here. This square root is going to cancel with the square, and that's going to leave me with just y equals the square root of -72. I know that I just learned this, but when I have the negative square root, I am going to put an I in front because that's an imaginary number. So I have y equals that I. And then I can do in my calculator the square root of 72, but that calculator is going to spit out 8.48. There's going to be a lot more decimals there. This just means that this is my approximate answer. So 8.48 I would be my approximate answer, remembering that I have the positive version and the negative version. If I wanted the exact version, right, so this is exactly what that number is, I would have to split it up into my 2 and 36, split it into 2 and 18, split that into 2 and 9, splits into 3 and 3. I'm going to find my pairs, so I have a group of 2 here. I would make a 2 outside. I have a group of 3 here. I make a 3 outside. I have that I because I know that it is a negative square root. And then left inside is that 2 from before. Right, so I have that 2 there. These will combine to give me 6i square root 2. And I know that it's going to be plus or minus because I took the square root. Right. So these answers are exactly the same. If you typed in 6 square root 2 in your calculator, you would get 8.48. So we just have two ways of writing it. This would be the exact form, and this here would be the approximate version. Right? So we have two ways. Both are equally correct. One is good for some situations and one for others. So that was level 1. Fairly basic, just we're going to follow those same 2 steps for the rest of the time. Separate the square and then take the square root. So here we need to get the square all by itself. So I see that there's a -1 here, so I'm going to get rid of that by adding 1 on both sides. leaves me with 2x squared equals 24. From there, I see that there's 2 times x squared. I'm going to get rid of that by dividing. So I have x squared equals 12. Now I have the x squared by itself, so I'm going to take the square root of both sides. That's going to leave me with x equals plus or minus the square root of 12. I could do that on my calculator, which would give me the approximate answer plus or minus 3.464. So that is a possible answer. Or I could do 12 is 2 and 6, which is 2 and 3. I have this 2 that comes to the outside. That's 2 out here. 3 is left inside here, still plus or minus. This would be my exact form. So my exact form is going to have the square root remain inside of it, and then my decimal form is the approximate. So looking at the second one, if you want to pause the video and take a stab at this one, now would be a good time to do it. And then we'll take a look. So if you're back and looking, we have -4 on both sides. It's going to give me -5y squared equals -16. I need to get y squared by itself, so I'm going to divide by -5 on both sides. I get y squared equals 16 over 5. That's because the negative over negative canceled, so 16 over 5. In my calculator, I can do 16 divided by 5, and that's going to give me 3.2, and I have y squared. From here, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So my square root and my square will cancel to give me y. In my calculator, I can do the approximate version of the square root of 3.2, which is 1.789. If I wanted to do, and then I'm going to remember plus or minus. So that's where I'm going to go from there. If I wanted to do the exact version, I wouldn't be able to do it with my decimal. I'd have to go back here. So I'd have 16 over 5, and I'd take the square root of 5 and the square root of 16. The square root of 16 is 4, so I know that's good there. And then I have the square root of 5 there. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to leave square root of 5 in the bottom. So I would have 4 times the square root of 5 over 5. And this would be plus or minus as well. For the sake of our conversation here, if we get a fraction, we're going to go ahead and go with our approximate answer, because this isn't the skill that we're working on today, but I'm more than happy to work with you on it if you're interested. But we'll be okay with our approximate answer here. The way that we write approximately is we use this squiggly equal sign there, and then we say plus or minus 1.789. Easy enough. Then finally we have one that looks just a little bit different, but we're going to be able to rock it out. So in level 3, we see that there are parentheses here and the square is on the outside. That means that I'm going to get rid of the square, because I have it by itself. So I have 2x minus 3. It's going to cancel and leave me with positive or negative 2. So because there's a positive or negative 2 here, I'm going to split it into 2 pieces. I have 2x minus 3 could be positive 2, and 2x minus 3 could be the negative 2. So I have the 2 options there. I'm going to add 3 on both sides. Gives me 2x equals 5. Divide by 2. I get x equals 5 halves. It's one of my answers. Or I have plus 3 on both sides. Gives me 2x equals 1. Divide by 2. I get x equals 1 half. So I see my 2 solutions here aren't just the positive and negative version. They're actually 2 separate answers because we had to split it into 2 equations. Right? If we see one slightly different, just like this one, again, I need to get x squared by itself. So I have, it's multiplied by negative 100 and subtracting 2. So I'm going to add 2 on both sides. Negative 100 x squared equals 2. Divide by negative 100 on both sides. X squared equals, I'm going to go ahead and get that decimal number. So 2 divided by 100 is 0.02, and it's a decimal. That's kind of gnarly, so I'm going to go ahead and take the square root of both sides. That's going to knock out my square here, leave me with just x equals. I remember that I'm going to be plus or minus because I did do that square root. I know it's going to be I because I have the negative inside. And then I'm going to do the square root of 0.02, and that's going to give me 0.141. Right? From there, I know that this part has to go first. It's going to go right here. So I have x is equal to the positive or negative version of 0.141, and then I. All right, so a little bit spicier because it does have those decimals.